The Auburn Tigers are officially back.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast live from the WFA studios in Dallas, where we are recording the Amazon Bracket Breakdown shows. Here together, Isaac Schade, Andy Patton, with the Final Four officially set. You're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. And as a reminder, you can listen to this show ad-free on Amazon Music. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, folks, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Isaac, it is the least chalky or the most chalky Final Four that you can
it's all 4-16.
No, it is all 4-1 seeds. First time since 2008 we have gotten that. And we're going to break it down. We're going to talk about Auburn's win over Michigan State. We're going to talk about Houston thwarting Tennessee. They'd had a couple close games, did not have a close game on Sunday against the Vols. We're going to talk about that. But we're going to start with the Auburn-Michigan State game. The score ended up being a lot closer than this game really kind of felt like it was. It was a 6-point game. Auburn wins 70-64, but in reality, Auburn went out and went on a huge 17-0 run early in this game and kind of felt like they had control throughout. And a big credit to Tom Izzo and Michigan State for hanging with it and kind of making this a game. Johni Broome goes down with the second half injury, misses about 5 minutes of game action. He came back and seems to be good, which is obviously huge for Auburn.
It was like an ankle and
the
way his elbow bent in, I was like, the human body don't do stuff like that.
It looked really bad. And the fact that his ankle was also...
And his parents came down.
Everybody seemed like they were really panicking. And it seems like he's doing good. So that's huge news for
He's done
Auburn.
that a lot this year. You know, like he's had multiple injuries, missed 2 full SEC games, and only played 2 minutes in their Georgia State game.
That sounds right,
but it felt like each time he's been injured this year, he's come back more quickly than probably we thought.
Yeah, he's a tough kid. And I think, we were kind of prepping for this conversation that I don't think we'll need to have as much because he's healthy. It seems okay, but Auburn has done well without Johni Broome at times too. A testament to the depth of this team, to the performances of guys like Hardwell and Chaney Johnson and what they're able to do. I was really impressed. But also, you mentioned this is something Johni Broome's done. You know what else he's done? Rack up double doubles. He's really good at that. He had 25 points in this one, 14 boards. Second game in a row, he had a double double in the first half. And again, a double-double in the first half in your first-round matchup against a 16 seed, sure, whatever. But he's getting double-doubles in the first half against Michigan State and against these great programs. Like, it's just tremendous what he's been able to do. So much attention on Cooper Flagg, and justifiably so. But Johni Broome was the strongest candidate for Player of the Year for most of the year for a reason, because of what he's capable of doing.
Andy, it's really impressive stuff. And it's funny that it was both Michigan Big Ten schools this weekend that he and Auburn knocked off. And I think really it brings up with just them doing this after, in this round of 32 for Johni Broome had single digit, I think it was like 8, while Pettiford led them in scoring, who, I mean, good grief. We talk about it all the time, and Pettiford's living up to it. But
he's fantastic.
It seemed like, we were worried about Chad Baker-Mazara's hip coming into this weekend. He started both games. Felt a little bit off. He was not his usual, like, wildly productive self. Of course, he's a little bit of a roller coaster anyway, both in terms of production and emotional stability. But man, Auburn was really able to do this. And Andy, I guess it leads me to ask us the question: is Auburn back? I mean, they were the number 1 overall seed in this thing. They were the one that for so much of this year was like, what is anyone going to do with Auburn? Lately, it's felt like Duke is maybe a little more inevitable. But are you feeling better about Auburn now than maybe you were a week or two ago?
Yeah, I am. And I think the host of Locked On Auburn, Zach Blackerby, I think he would tell you that Auburn never left. And I think that there's an argument for that to be made, that Auburn, they had this stretch where we've referenced it a bunch of times on the show, the 3 losses in 4 games coming into the NCAA tournament. And we mention it a lot because that's exceedingly rare for teams to do, who are number 1 seeds in general. And for them to be the number 1 overall seed still after losing 3 of their last 4 games is a testament to the incredible strength of their resume getting to that point. But it's also unique. It's odd. You don't see that very often. And it was like, is this could this lead to them struggling in a second round game? Or, and Creighton was a tough challenge
That
for
was.
them. But they have really played well since then. Their second half against Michigan and their full game against Michigan State were excellent. And I think you take that 60 minutes of basketball, they play like that in these next two games. There's a very real chance that Bruce Pearl's hanging a banner at Auburn. And I still think Duke is the team to beat.
Yeah.
And I think Duke's size and physicality and defensive ability is going to be a really challenge for Auburn, but they are not a team to be taken lightly, and they are. I mean, the FanDuel lines have them as the lowest odds to win the championship, despite being
crazy.
It's four number one seeds, and they were the number one overall seed, and they have the lowest odds. We're saying it's a chalky tournament, and it sure is, but that's a pretty unique thing that's happening here.
I think Bruce Pearl's probably going to use that as locker room board material.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. That's exactly
That's
what it is.
not the phrase at all. What am I looking for? Bulletin board material. Believe.
There it is. Ted Lasso material. Oh man, I don't know if I could think of coaches different than Bruce Pearl and Ted Lasso, but that's fine.
I would
it's a bit of a different vibe.
I would love for Jason Sudeikis to interview Bruce Pearl as Ted Lasso. Like that would be phenomenal content.
Bruce Pearl would totally run with it too.
Absolutely, because he's all down for what I love. Speaking of which, I love that Tracy Wolfson interviewed Bruce Pearl and Tom Izzo together before the game.
That was really cool.
Something I was impressed that Auburn did in this game. They had a bunch of turnovers in that Michigan game. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but in particular in the first half. Just 2 in the first half here against a tough Michigan State team, right? That wants to get in and force some of that. And so I thought some of those kind of things were important too for Auburn. I am curious to see, sometimes with an injury, heat of the moment, you're like, I'm good. How's that thing going to be feeling this morning, Monday morning, when he wakes up? That, I mean, and we can't know. Only he can know what he'll be ready to do when we get to Saturday. And thankfully, he's got a whole
That's
week.
what I was about to say. He's got a week to. It's not a 2-day turnaround like a lot of these games are. So I think Broome's going to be totally fine. But even if he's not, at least they have 4 or 5 days to prepare. And like we said, they have one without Johni Broome this year as well. So something to keep an eye on as we get towards those Final Four games.
Andy, and you know what this loss for Michigan State means?
Big Ten's out again.
The Big Ten drought lives on.
The Big Ten drought goes on. And honestly, we got another drought that we're going to talk about now because Tennessee had a chance 2 years in a row. They've gone to the Elite Eight to break the long streak of never making the Final Four. Kelvin Sampson and Houston had something to say about that. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, folks, March Madness is here. It's wrapping up, and FanDuel, they're giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on everything, buzzer beaters. I'd say Cinderella stories, but folks, we are fresh out of Cinderella stories this year.
Auburn's the least favorite at FanDuel. They're a Cinderella.
Auburn is our Cinderella story. We're going to talk about who's cutting down the nets as well. And we've got just 4 remaining teams, plenty of exciting lines to bet on. Here are your odds for the upcoming games. Florida 2.5-point favorites over Auburn. Duke 4.5-point favorites over Houston. We mentioned the actual national championship odds. I'll give them here. Duke plus 105, Florida plus 270, Houston plus 400, and then Auburn, like we said, number 1 overall seed coming into the tournament. Despite still being here in the Final Four, they are at plus 500. Might be some action worth getting in on there. If you're in on that, the FanDuel app's super simple to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action for the rest of the NCAA tournament. All right, Isaac, the second game on Sunday, the Houston Cougars taking on the Tennessee Volunteers 1-2. Houston wins this one by 19, 69-50. And honestly, it barely even felt that close. Like Houston just absolutely rolled in this game. And one of the big talking points with Houston was this close game against Gonzaga where they had like a 10, 12-point lead, but then Caleb Battle had a chance to tie that thing in the closing seconds. They had a very close game against Purdue, which we gave a lot of airtime to with the excitement of the end of that game, with Uzom's push off and the blob and everything that went down at the end of that one. But now they kind of get to coast to a win here. And the defense absolutely stymies Tennessee in this game. They shot under 30% from the field, 17% from 3. Like this team Tennessee's offense was just completely non-existent in this game. Houston completely shut them down. I think I want to talk about the Houston side of things, but I think we got to focus on the fact that this is a streak for Tennessee that lives on. They have yet to make a Final Four in their program. Rick Barnes, he's got them to 2 straight Elite Eights, but this team has folded an opportunity. I mean, again, they were the lower seed here. It's not not a bad loss in a vacuum, but in the sense of this team kind of really trying to finally break that streak, this was a tough one for them.
Yeah, and it feels like it's going to happen at some point, right? Like
they're right there.
Just to put it in, for those of you who don't know, Andy is our great host of Locked On Gonzaga.
Yeah, nailed it.
Nailed it. I love Lost, by the way. What a great show.
Yeah, right.
Of Locked On Zags, I guess it's technically called. Like, it just feels like at some point it's inevitable that Mark Few's going to. Like, it feels like that to me with Tennessee, right? Like, this is going to happen, but it is difficult because now. This is the second time in the last 2 years they've made the Elite Eight and aren't able to finish it off. Their third ever Elite Eight.
And I think too, if you're like for some Tennessee fans, and I hate you never want to feel like full doom or doomsday or whatever, but like Ziegler's out of eligibility. He's going to be gone after this. He's such an important part of this team. But like last year, Santiago Vescovi and Dalton Connect moved on, and this team still made it back to the Elite Eight. So like there's a chance. Rick Barnes, obviously, he's not going to be around forever, but he's been very consistent at getting this team, into the second weekend. And
I'd love for him to be the one to get him.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if he could get it there. But I'm also. Kelvin Sampson and the Cougs, I mean, after 2 years of injuries that hurt their ability to go past the Sweet 16 to now be back in the Final Four after getting there in 2021. This team is tough. They're gritty. They're physical. They absolutely scorched their way through the Big 12 in a way that was just, didn't get as much attention as it should have because there was so much talk about the SEC and Duke rolling their way through the ACC. But Houston, they had a 13-game win streak, lost a game to Texas Tech at home, and then went on like a 17-game winning streak. Like that's just – their second most recent loss was in late November against San Diego State. Like this team has just been absolutely cruising, and they are not the favorite right now. But man, it's hard to bet against them with how well they've played lately.
It is, they're obviously their next matchup is going to be against Duke in that length, and obviously we'll get ready for that this week, which is going to be a challenge. But that's what this team does. Man. They just like bring it on. Let's make it happen. Andy, what I thought was interesting about this was Tennessee in both games this weekend, both the Kentucky game when it was a really slow start, but then they ended up, getting going. They started 2 of 10 against Kentucky and wound up kind of blitzing it, right? Like got it out to like a 15-point lead and then just basically maintained that the rest of the game. Against Houston on Sunday, it was basically the same thing, a 1 of 12 start. But with all due respect to Kentucky, who did great in year one under Mark Pope, this is a different animal they're messing with because this Houston offense is a different Houston offense, man. They're so good and dynamic, and they're going to make you pay. And, we've talked about it so much with Tennessee's offense. Like, yes, this is about Houston's defense, but at some point in this tournament, Tennessee's offense was going to let them down. And when you take that inconsistency with Houston's defensive prowess, and it felt like Tennessee was just having to take all the shots that Houston wanted them to take, deep 2s, deep 3s, contest all of that. They were just having to settle early. Eventually they got into a rhythm, but not till after halftime because they only had 15 points, Andy, in the first half. The fewest points ever in an NCAA tournament game for a 1 or 2 seed. Crazy.
I saw a stat that Houston in the halves of the NCAA tournament, the second most points they've given up in an entire half in this tournament is 35. The most was, and it stands out even more that Gonzaga was able to score 49 against them in the second half because nobody else has even come close to scoring that many points against this Houston team and a half this year, this tournament, I should say. And like we talked about Houston being this highly efficient offense, what's so great about this team is that they can have a somewhat off night. And I think that they shot 42% from the field. They shot 36% from 3. By no means bad, but below their standard. And I think a credit goes to Tennessee's defense. Tennessee is a phenomenal defensive team. And I think they executed in a way of being able to slow down Houston offensively and force them to miss shots. The problem, A, their offense didn't show up, like we said, but B, Houston got 14 offensive rebounds, and you cannot let this Houston team get second chance opportunities. I mean, they will absolutely kill you on the glass.
19-8.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a massive difference in a game that you can't afford to give that up. So I think you look at Houston's overall numbers here, only 4 of 4 from the free throw line, but they only had 5 turnovers. If you're not forcing turnovers, if you're giving them second chance opportunities, you're going to lose every single time. Yeah, and Houston did exactly what they needed to do to win this game.
My word, I just and so good because like I really really thought they were going to be Final Four bound last year.
Yeah, it seemed like it.
And then Jamal Schade has that injury in the Sweet 16, funnily enough, against Duke, who they'll get a rematch with.
Yep.
And so it's great to see them get back here. I wish Schade was part of the ride. That's the only bummer of it. But man, just good for Kelvin Sampson. And we often say this kind of stuff, but you talked about kind of the end of things here for Zakiya Ziegler and these older guys.
Yeah.
And you're so right. He's been such a staple of this Vols program. And to just see him go wrap himself around Rick Barnes when he checked out for the last time, I just
you felt it.
I felt it. And we've started saying this a lot. Like we're both dads, right? And I think that's unlocked a new emotion in us where I feel that differently now than before I was a father.
Yeah.
But
part of that conversation that we've been having is like it feels like these guards, these fifth-year guards or seniors who are moving on, all of them have either had really great final games like Caleb Love did, and like some of the other guys did, or John L. Davis, the other one who had 30 burger, or they've had frustratingly bad games. And Mark Sears, I feel for him for his season ending on a pretty bad performance by.
It's all short guards.
Yeah, it's been the short guards. Ziegler, I mean, he finished.
RJ Davis.
He finishes 5 points, 5 assists, 4 turnovers, 1 of 9. Like that's very uncharacteristic for Zakiya Ziegler, and obviously some of that comes Houston's tough, and they do that to you. But I just feel you always remember your last game, and I just feel for Ziegler that this is what it was, because he's a much, much better player than what he was able to do today. I don't know that would have mattered. No. He could have gone out and had 15 and 9, and shot a little bit better from the field, and I think they still lose. But it's tough to see that go like that for him.
Yeah, Andy, it really is. That's the difference of like, if you're covering an NBA guy, unless he's like retiring, it's like, all right, that sucks, but next year, what are we doing? And we'll see what happens. As for Tennessee, I mean, you kind of alluded to it a little bit ago. It feels like Rick Barnes has done really well in the portal.
Yeah.
Landing landing these guys, we were really excited about Lanier. Dubar hasn't done as much as maybe we thought he would. Akpara has come in and been in the starting lineup.
Yeah.
Because they lost both Adu and Awaka. Awaka, I think, Adu came back and had a pretty good year when it was all said and done. But, they're able to reload. They're going to have to do that again because they're going to lose a lot. And we'll keep rolling with Houston, Andy. But great Elite Eight Sunday. Neither game was close, but it was interesting how similar these game scripts were, where in the both of them just kind of got out to big, quick, early leads and then just held on to it.
Kind of maintained. Yeah, absolutely. And like we said at the top, for the first time since 2008, we have all 1 seeds in the Final Four. And we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about if that's a sign of things to come. I think there's people who are like, oh, like a lot of SEC dominance. There's a lot of money in the SEC, a lot of number 1 seeds dominating. Is this kind of the future of college basketball? We're going to give our thoughts on that, talk a little bit about these matchups coming up here in just a second. All right, Isaac, closing out the show, continuing our conversation about the fact that we have 4 1 seeds in the Final Four. Something that this year it felt likely, like more likely than it often does. It just, these teams were so dominant, and I think a lot of people are very hesitant to pick all 4 1 seeds because it's boring, and you don't want to win your bracket pool in a boring way necessarily, but certainly would have helped for teams that did that this year, because these teams just kind of dominated throughout here. Some close games, some fun games. We talked about it a lot with Houston, but at the end of the day, these are the 4 best teams in college basketball, and they're going to compete against each other for that national championship. And it's hard to dislike that. It's fun to see the 1 seeds. It's fun to see the 11 seeds. It's fun to see VCU or George Mason or whomever in the Final Four, but it's also fun to see the best teams in college basketball. And these 2 matchups, Auburn versus Florida, obviously we've seen that a couple times this year already. We know we're getting a good game there. And then Duke Houston should be a really fun one, rematch of last year's NCAA tournament game. Size, length, physicality for both teams. Just a lot of fun in these matchups, even if it's not as fun from a, we love the upsets type of situation.
It's just fun. Yeah, it's fun from a great basketball. We've only got 3 games left in, if we're not counting the Crown or the NIT.
We're not
counting the Crown.
Yeah. Sorry.
But Andy, we've got 3 games left, and they're all between the 4 best teams in America. That's how you want it to happen. We love the randomness, and that's why it's called madness. But boy, when we get this kind of ending, this is right. And I know both Tennessee and Bama had some bona fide 1 seed credentials.
It would feel pretty chalky if they were in it too. Like it wouldn't feel much different. Even Michigan State, it wouldn't feel much different.
But when all was said and done, this, as you said, was the obvious 4 1 seeds.
Yep.
And I think they did separate, not just from, St. John's and Michigan State and everyone else as well, but also from Tennessee and Bama. I thought there was a thin, but a gap, a clear line of delineation. And then Bama and Tennessee were in a tier unto themselves and then beyond. Yeah. But it's these teams, man, and it's great stuff.
Yeah. And again, one result doesn't tell the whole story, but Bama and Tennessee each lost by 19 and 20, respectively, to 1 seeds. Like it's hard to not think there was a gap there when that was the final score for those 2 games. So what we want to talk about now is like whether this is going to continue to happen, because like you said, we love the randomness. We love the chaos. We love even when it's like this, but I think part of it is that this happening, all 4 1 seeds and an Elite 8 with 3 2 seeds and a 3 seed, like that is random. Like that doesn't happen very often. I think that's part of this conversation is like, yes, it seems like this should happen more than it does, but it's been 17 years since we had all 4 1 seeds in the Final Four. Like this is not something that happens all that often. I don't think that it's a pattern necessarily. I understand the concept of, hey, these SEC schools have a bunch of money and they're buying players quite literally. Like we know that that's happening. I'm not going to pretend to be naive on that, but I don't think that it necessarily means that. I don't think that one NCAA tournament resulting the way that this one has gone means that we're in for a pattern of this going forward. Maybe we ask this question again in 2 years. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
But yeah, and like as we look at it, like going back to 2008, the only other time in the modern tournament era, which is 1985, by the way, everybody. That's when things went to 64 teams. That year in 2008, the seed aggregate was 4. In 07, it was 6. In 09, it was 7. Right. So we had a 3-year stretch there of super chalk level. But everything surrounding that is anti that, right? Like, and so there are these weird little pops. But after, let's leave 2011 behind and move forward a little bit. Not including this year, 10 of the previous 11 tournaments, we have had a Final Four team that was a 7 seed or worse, Andy.
10 out of 11.
10 out of the last 11 years. And so, and the one outlier there, the worst was a 5 seed. So, I mean, like we could say the last 11 tournaments, we've had a 5 seed or worse in the Final Four. Yeah. And so like, I'm inclined to believe that that's the norm. Yeah. And that what we're experiencing now is the statistical outlier. Now, 5 years down the road, if we're seeing this trend, okay, let's have another conversation. Yes. But 1 year doesn't change the randomness. And I'm hopeful that 1 year and because let's admit, last offseason was an escalation of NIL unlike anything we had seen. And I think this offseason is going to be the same, right? Like I don't see any change.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we're going to see coaches figure this out even better. Like the coaches that did this poorly, we'll call them out. I don't mind calling them out. Indiana, Kansas State, like the programs that spent a bunch of money without paying as much attention to roster construction or whatever. I mean, Indiana already bounced their coach. Mike Whitson's out the door. Jerome Tang obviously holding on to his position right now. But yeah, I think it's one of those things that's going to continue to be, it's going to continue to happen.
You guys, Kylen Mills, great post, is here with us hanging out.
Yes.
Kylen, how's it going?
Good. So I'm wearing black today and dressed like Wednesday Addams because I am mourning the end of the Big Ten basketball season.
So we literally just talked about
Michigan State was my last up. Oh, okay. All right.
We're dropping cameras. We just talked about, Kylen, how the Big Ten drought lives on. 24 straight tournaments without a Big Ten drought.
Oh, Michigan State was the last hope, you guys. I did an interview on Sirius XM the other day, a couple days ago, and they were asking me, like, okay, which Big Ten team is going to do it? Like, which is the one you feel most confident in? And honestly, none of them. With the way the SEC teams have been playing in the NCAA tournament, I was just like, unfortunately, as much as I would love to say, like, I feel great that Maryland's going to come in and go on a roll and finish out these last couple games, I couldn't say that because they all have looked so good. And then obviously Duke out of the ACC, but
the top end just isn't there.
It's just the top end isn't there. That's it. I think Michigan State was the team that had the best shot. Auburn came out and played well. So
It did.
sad day for me, but still a good day for college basketball.
Still a good day. Yeah, fun to have the 4-1 seeds in. Kylen, fun to have you here, even if you are dressed like Wednesday Addams.
Yeah,
so
you know what?
It was very on brand.
It was the vibe. Oh, perfect. We're
there
gonna do this.
It's not animal sounds, but it's something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so good. So you guys, Kylen has been a guest on the show before, just a couple weeks ago. She and I were chatting Big Ten stuff. And Kylen is everywhere all the time, right? Like,
yes.
Technically a Fox employee. In studio.
Fox, you'll see me on Big Ten.
And doing NWSL stuff now, hosting in studio.
Yes.
Where I guess it'd probably be easier to say, what are you not involved in this part of the conversation?
That's a good question. I'll tell you what, I can't execute on the court. Don't ask me why. Back in the green room, we were just talking about that, and like we were going over all of Gordon Hayward's stats and like looking back at a bunch of his ratings and like 2K and stuff, and it was just funny because no one in the room can play basketball. But we were all critiquing Gordon Hayward's numbers.
As
just hysterical.
Totally, as we should.
So that's I'm just gonna say, I want to admit right now, that's one thing I cannot do. A JV high school basketball is as far as my career went. I did play AAU as a kid, but that's as far as we go. That's the thing though. We get to talk about the sport.
Right,
doesn't mean we can do
that.
And we're real good at that.
Yeah. Exactly
so
right.
Kylen, last question, and then we're actually signing off. Is this
perfect time because I'm ready to roll.
Yeah.
We're recording our show, people.
Bracket Breakdown on Amazon Fire TV channels. You just got to say, Alexa, play Bracket Breakdown. Okay. That's what Kylen said.
I've been saying that in my sleep.
Kylen, the question we were just trying to answer is this year with its chalkiness the anomaly, or is this the new norm? What are your thoughts?
Oh, this is such a tough question because you look back at like last year prior when there was NIL as a factor, and we still saw lower seeds that, last year NC State all of a sudden comes out of the ACC tournament as a team that wasn't even going to be in the NCAA tournament and, rolls through to the Final Four. Yeah, the magic run. So we've still seen it recently, but I also do think there's going to be less parity in the sport. I do believe that. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have dollars to spend, you're going to draw the best talent. Now, I think there still is a place for good coaching, roster construction. Like, I don't think it's all about spending the money. A team we were just talking about is Rutgers, spending a ton of money to bring in two of the potentially top 3 NBA draft picks this season. And they were a team that was a huge disappointment. And I think it's evidence that like coaching still is a factor, having the right mix of players, having some veterans on the floor. Like, I do think those things still matter. But at the end of the day, I think when there's a mass disparity in talent, when you look at mid-majors and like a Butler team, he used to be able to compete with the Duke. I just think we're going to keep seeing that separation, which is going to make it more difficult for those magical Cinderella type runs that we're used to seeing. So my answer maybe is a little bit of both, but I think time will tell. We got to see what the next couple of years look like. Because again, we're still like NIL is still in its infancy, just in terms of, the impact on college basketball. So I think we're really going to find that out. But I do think it's going to be a factor because we've talked to Gordon about this. Like a guy who went to Butler, if you go to Butler and you're successful one season and produces, hey, we're going to pay you a couple million. I said, would you go to Purdue? He's like, yeah.
Boiler up.
See, go where the money is. And so much of college basketball is becoming a business in that way.
And Kylen, I think you're so right about the coaching. We saw so many examples of that this weekend, from Kelvin Sampson's blob play to just calls and other things. So, man, it's going to be really interesting, you guys, to see what's going to happen.
It is.
Andy, get us out of here.
Folks, that's going to wrap it up for us today. Our final live show in Dallas. So much fun to be here, hanging out with Isaac. So much fun to be hanging out with you as well, Kylen. Excited to have you hop on the show, but it's going to wrap it up for us today. We're going to have a lot more shows getting you ready for the Final Four games coming up on Saturday. Of course, getting you ready for the national championship. I can tell you what, it's going to be between 2 1 seeds. Don't know which two, but I know that we got 2. Yeah, right. We got
hot takes. Randy Patton. Hot takes
in that Final Four, in that championship game, folks. Thanks again for listening. As always, I want to say apologies to the lawyer family. Kylen, apologies to the entire Big Ten lawyer family as well. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the Mick Bruins. And until tomorrow,
peace.